Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Guy Boston Sports Live NFL Draft Recap. We're talking about what happened last night in the first round with our NFL draft guy, Andrew Nason. Nason, thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking about the draft with us once again.
Always glad to be here.
All right, so let's start out with some simple stuff, just reaction. Let me get just your overall reaction to last night, wide scoping, nothing specific, but how did you think the first round went generally? Did it surprise you a lot? Or did it go pretty much how you expected? I mean, I know there were at least a few things, especially relating to the quarterbacks, that didn't go how we all thought they were going to go and what was being reported for the last few months.
Yeah, I mean, the draft took longer than I expected. I think everyone was pretty pissed about the first two picks taking as long as they did. But, in general, we didn't see a lot of movement at the top of the draft, which I thought was really surprising. We started to see those trades happen around pick 11. But it seemed like my biggest surprise was that two quarterbacks fell out of the top 10. Obviously, Fields came off at 11 and Mack at 15. But, the way the offseason's been, shaping out really is it seemed like all five were going to go before possibly pick 8. So that was a little bit of a surprise. But, you had a couple reaches. You had some, we had some gambles. But we see that every year. The Raiders took a guy way too early. That's just normal. So, pretty typical draft. Just, those surprises you always expect, honestly.
Yeah, and the quarterback thing was interesting because, as the draft got closer and closer, it started to come to my head like, wow, these quarterbacks are all going to go in the top 10. And I started thinking about the greatest quarterback classes of all time. And, you got the 83 one with Marino and all those guys, and the Manning and Roethlisberger, that draft, and Rivers and all those guys. And then I even, brought up, I thought started to come into my mind now, the Allen, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield draft. I mean, that's not, but when it's all said and done, that might sneak its way into the top 10 as well. And so I started thinking about these greatest draft classes of all time. And I said, man, if 5 quarterbacks go in the top 10 picks, like that is, I know it's, we have to wait for their careers to start, but that is a big, endorsement for those guys to be, among the greatest ever. And if we're just talking about, day of the draft, it might have been like the most, the most hyped draft class, quarterback class ever. And it still might be, I mean, based on where they were selected. But I think it had to have been expected, like, even if those guys, even if it is one of the greatest quarterback classes of all time, even if it is, going to end up being in that, and the prospects are as good as where they were picked, it was still so hard to imagine that 5 guys would go in the top 10. Like that's a lot. I know it's quarterback, but that is a lot for one position, 5 out of 10. And it was a lot as is, 5 in the first 15. But you had to imagine that even though it wasn't reporting that way, even though it didn't seem like it was headed that way, that 1 or 2 of those guys had to fall. I mean, based on the reporting, I actually thought it was going to be Trey Lance if someone was falling, because it seemed like Mac Jones was going to the Niners at 3, and it seemed like the Patriots wanted to trade it for Justin Fields, and that's the way things were going. And you didn't really hear anyone linked like strongly to Trey Lance ahead of the draft until that late push by the Niners. So it was, it was hard to figure out who that was going to be because of that kind of misreporting out there. But the fact that someone did surprise me because of the reporting, but in hindsight, I don't think we should have been surprised by it.
No, I think the only reason we look at the draft before this and we thought that 5 guys are going to go in the top 10 is because of the importance we've seen with young quarterbacks and the short leash they get, in the modern NFL. And, the fact is you have to get a quarterback and you have to move early to get them usually. So I think this shouldn't be a shock to NFL teams that it was 5 in the top 15, not top 10. But, I think in terms of fans, we just all expect that, these teams are going to be super aggressive, but, they still were. I mean, we still had 3 guys go in the top 3. That's still definitely impressive. It's only happened a few times. But there's naturally going to be some sort of slide. It's just very interesting how, we perceive quarterbacks versus how NFL teams do, I guess.
What do you think of the fact that the Niners I shouldn't say the Niners, sorry. What do you think about the fact that the Panthers and the Broncos, 2 teams that were linked to quarterbacks a little bit, seemed like they might be headed in that direction, both passed when Fields and Jones were on the board? Did that surprise you at all?
The Broncos, yes. I think with the Panthers, they obviously made an investment in Sam Darnold. Not enough where, it is 100% they weren't going to take a quarterback, but enough where you have to give Sam Darnold a chance, and they had a chance to get a really good player there. I was expecting maybe Rashawn Slater there. J.C. Horn, they need a cornerback, and that's a hell of a pick for them. With Denver, I think the thing that people are forgetting is last year was a really weird year with COVID. Drew Lock didn't get a real offseason, as going into his starting year. A lot of new weapons on that offense, with Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. Cortland Sutton went down. Drew Lock showed a lot of talent in the second half of the 2019 season, and he showed flashes last year. So I think with the Broncos, maybe they just didn't feel strongly enough about Mac Jones or Justin Fields. I mean, I would disagree in terms of Fields, but they might have just looked at it and said, hey, we have a chance to get a really good corner. Maybe they were really high on Patrick Surtain in this case. They definitely need corners in that division with all the wide receivers they're going to be dealing with and the quarterbacks. But I think they might just believe in Drew Lock, and it might be just they're going to give him one more shot. A full off season. I know they're going to be doing a lot of virtual stuff still, but he's going to have Jerry Jeudy seasoned. He's going to have KJ Hamler nice and seasoned. The offensive line's going to be able to get together again. He's got Albert O and Noah Fant at tight end and Cortland Sutton coming back. Melvin Gordon. They added to this. They're going to be able to still add to this team, this defense. Von Miller's coming back. They might just believe, hey, we have a shot to compete here. Let's not start over the quarterback yet. Worst case, we go into this with Drew Lock and he sucks. Vic Fangio gets fired and we move on. And they'll be picking high next year. So we'll see. But I think they just truly believe that they're going to give Drew Lock one more shot. So I get it.
Yeah, and I don't understand that. I mean, look, I get that Drew Lock, there's still some things to like about Drew Lock, but I was never a Drew Lock guy, and I still consistently haven't been. And I brought up, like, last year against the Raiders, he threw, 4 or 5 picks in that game? Like, and I get you wanting to have a little bit of a leash, a little bit of a long leash on a young guy, let him make mistakes, let him grow. But, like, after that game, I was like, okay, no. Like, no, you have to get rid of Drew Lock. And I understand they had some injuries last year. But the weapons on that offense, like, they should have – Drew Lock should have been better than he was.
There's 2 rookies he's starting. Tim Patrick was just coming into himself. So I'm just saying, it wasn't the ideal situation for your second-year quarterback to do.
I mean, it was pretty good, though. I mean, Hamler, Jeudy, Fant, Gordon, Lindsey, like, they have a ton of weapons on that offense. And if Sutton was healthy, it would have been an even different story, because then you're talking about all kinds of stuff to use, weapons to throw to. But I
think the point is just they're young. That's the thing. They're young, and they're kind of coming together as a unit. So what happens when you give them that extra year together to develop and grow that chemistry? Because it's 2 rookies who came into minicamp. They couldn't do any voluntary offseason workouts. They couldn't do anything.
Yeah, I don't know. I understand that, and I understand they're still young. I still think that in the NFL, a lot of times it's not like other sports where it takes a while for guys to grow. In the NFL, some guys, and especially in the fact that you have to spend 3 years in college plays into this a lot. But a lot of guys just jump in, hit the ground running, and if they're going to be great, they're really good right away. And so, I get what you're saying. I'm not a Drew Lock guy. And if I was the Broncos with those weapons, like, I think that situation would have been perfect for Justin Fields, like, to walk in, have all those guys to throw to. And I really didn't think they were taking a quarterback after they traded for Teddy Bridgewater, because to me, it just doesn't make sense to have Drew Lock and Bridgewater and a rookie. Like, you can have 3 quarterbacks, but usually you don't have 3 quarterbacks that you could argue all 3 of them could realistically start. And like that's a little bit too much. It's so I didn't think they were going to do it after they took Bridgewater, but when Fields was available to them and they didn't pull the trigger, that really, really annoyed me, because, I think obviously I wanted him in New England too, so it didn't annoy me too much. But as a neutral NFL observer, I looked at it and I said, that would have been perfect for him. And to fall to instead Chicago trading up, like, that's the antithesis of the situation. And they have Allen Robinson, so it's not all bad. But that Chicago offense, and who knows how much of it was Trubisky and Foles and whatnot, but it's a lot less appealing to me than what the Broncos have to offer. Like, it's really Allen Robinson, and that's kind of it. So, I don't love the fit there for Fields. I think there were a number of teams I would have rather seen him go to that would have been better fits situations for him. But, Chicago they needed a quarterback, and it'll be, interesting to see what's going to happen there with him and Andy Dalton, if he's going to start right away, if Dalton's going to start right away. Because I know, we hear this every single year when any team's drafts a quarterback, they, for the most part, Lawrence, they never want to hand the reins to them right away. So it's like, the incumbent is the starter. Tyrod Taylor is the starter over Justin Herbert, or Ryan Fitzpatrick starter over Tua, or whatever. And then eventually it gets halfway through the season, and you're like, all right, we'll start the rookie. So
or your team doctor stabs your guy in the lung. So
yeah, so I don't necessarily think that just because they're saying Andy Dalton's still the starter and the Patriots saying Cam Newton's still the starter, that stuff's going to hold true. But even still, I would have some serious reservations about throwing Justin Fields in there. I just don't think they're going to have a choice. And I think that's going to be really bad for Justin Fields in year one.
Yeah, I mean, if they can help the offensive line in the second and third rounds, that'll be helpful. I think people sleep on David Montgomery a little bit. I think he has some potential. He showed a lot of flashes last year in year two, I think, for him. Obviously, Allen Robinson helps. Cole Kmet is an emerging tight end. So I don't think it's the worst situation. I mean, the fact is Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy had to make this move. They are fighting for their jobs, and they could not realistically go into the year with Andy Dalton as their main quarterback. Chicago fans would have revolted. So I think, we'll talk about some other great picks, but this is one of the best picks of the draft, in my opinion. Just them moving up, not only saving their jobs, but giving Chicago some hope. And they got quarterback 2 as the 4th one off the board out of the top 10, and you gave up 1 first-round pick and like a 5th and a 4th maybe? Like that's chump change for a guy like Justin Fields. So just good move by them, and we'll see. I mean, I think he might be one of the top fantasy quarterback rookies next year, depending on when he starts. And I don't think Andy Dalton's going to have a long leash. So, my fantasy advice for people, if you're looking for a guy to keep on your watch list, or maybe a, draft and stash kind of guy for late in the year, Justin Fields will be the guy. A couple good weapons, and I think they're going to use his legs a lot more than Ohio State did. Like, remember, this guy was a pass first guy who can run in the 4.4s. He didn't run that much at Ohio State. He had his moments, obviously, but honestly, I think they could have used him more in the running game. I'm glad they didn't, personally. It kept him healthy, but that's just a lot of upside for him.
Yeah, it's interesting and I know, moving up 2 spots is different from moving up 8, but the pick before, you see, the Eagles jump 2 slots for just a 3rd. And then 1 pick later, you see it cost a 4th, a 5th, and another 1st to move 8 slots. And I thought it was a little much giving up another 1st, especially because
you got to do it.
Chicago's in a tough division. I mean, besides the Lions, the Vikings and Packers are both should be really good next year. And I know the Vikings were a little bit down last year, but I mean, it's not going to be easy for them to make the playoffs again. I really don't think so. So I think that could easily be a pick that's, pretty low again. And if that's the case, then, Chicago just gave up, another 1st-round pick. And when, a situation would have played out where who knows, I guess the real question is were the Patriots really interested in Justin Fields, and were they really targeting him? Because I have to imagine that's what the Bears had their eyes set on, and they were like, okay, well, we need to jump the Patriots here to make sure that they don't trade up for Fields.
You also have to hear Washington is sitting there too. They might have been looking to make a move. Who knows? Yeah, it's just, I mean, when you compare it to the deal that happened right before, it's a lot steeper. And like I said, I understand there's a big gap, there's a sizable gap there, but another 1st, I would have hesitated there a little bit. I think that they should have been able to at least, hold off for another pick, get it for a 2nd, and if Justin Fields works out, like you said, I mean, it's because it might come down to the player, the fact that they were moving up for a quarterback, that could raise the price a little bit. He's got top 5 quarterback in the NFL potential. And if you look at it, Aaron Rodgers wants out of Green Bay. I don't think he's going to be there next year, honestly. I mean, with his demeanor, I wouldn't be surprised. You have Jared Goff in that division and Kirk Cousins. Within 2 years, Justin Fields could very, very easily be the best quarterback in that NFC North if Aaron Rodgers is obviously gone. So if that happens, it's worth a 1st-rounder. No one's going to care about that. You got up and secured your guy, and I think that's what I wanted to see the Patriots do it. Even if we had to move up 4 spots, I would have given up a 1st at that point. I just think it's worth it when you can get a guy with this much upside for that kind of value too. So
no, you're right.
For me, hats off to Chicago.
Yeah, you're right. If Fields works out, then it's 100% worth it. There's no question about that.
A risk in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a quarterback, you give up pretty much anything. So we'll see. And I mean, we've talked about Fields' fall a lot. This was a guy that at one point was projected to be the 2nd pick in the draft. So I think for any team to get him outside of the top 10, like they had to have felt good about that, because I'm sure there's some teams out there that did still have him number 2 on their big board. I think it was few and far between. Whether Chicago was one of those, who knows? But I think that, clearly there was a time when people, valued Justin Fields a lot more than they did on draft night. And, if Chicago still does, they have to feel great about it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about some of these other things that happened in the draft. I mean, this transitions nicely into the Patriots and what they did. I mean, the thing that would surprise me about this is I would be, I understand that the need for a quarterback and kind of the unpredictability of it to an extent of like, okay, well, we have these guys graded, here, and, we think that they could both be okay, but we don't know for sure. So let's take whichever one falls to us. But I still have a hard time imagining, like, when you're scouting a quarterback, you have to like have the mindset of, okay, we pretty much think if we are targeting this specific guy. I find it very hard to believe in the draft that you would be like, okay, we'll just take whoever at that position. So that leads me to believe that it's hard for me to accept the fact that they were so close to being able to get Justin Fields. They could have made that move up the board, with the Cowboys. Let's say they gave the Cowboys the 15 in their second round pick this year. That should have got it done. Even, second round pick next year, whatever you wanted to trade. Like, if all the Eagles gave up was a third. So that should have been able to get it done. And if, again, like we talked about with the Bears, if 2 firsts, if Justin Fields is going to hit, it's absolutely worth it. So to me, it's hard to accept the fact that if it's true that the Patriots actually wanted Justin Fields, but they just took Mac Jones because they weren't willing to give up an extra second to move the board to get Fields, like that would be a little much to me.
Yeah, that's the disappointing part for me. And that's why I'm not happy about how last night went as a Patriots fan, because we only had to get up 4 spots. Realistically, I think we could have easily outbid Chicago in terms of, going at the Giants with an offer. But this is Belichick. The arrogance of Belichick that I can't stand. He holds on to this draft capital. He doesn't want to trade up. And I know he's done it in the past a few times, but he doesn't trade up early, and it's ridiculous to me.
But even forget outbidding Chicago. Like, think about just outbidding the Eagles for that 11th pick. Like, because that's a much steeper. That's a much less of a price. And I imagine that if you're the Giants, what appeals to you about that trade is like, okay, well, we think Devontae Smith's off the board. Yep. We think we can get the same guy.
Brilliant trade by Dallas, by the way. Just brilliant trade by them. They knew that, Philly was coming up for Devontae Smith, and they moved back 2 spots, pick up a third, and they got the best defender in the class. So
yeah,
it's a great move by them just to start off.
Yeah, and fantastic. But still, I mean, they are possibly could have gotten that same player at 15. So, I mean, you look at the Vikings the Vikings traded down, and I think who was it that traded up for?
That was the Jets. They went for Fair Tucker. Another great move for them, by the way. Great move to pair him with Zach Wilson. Absolutely.
So, I mean, really, you could argue the Cowboys could have got that same guy at 15 and picked up a second instead, and at the same time not helped out one of their division rivals. Well, also hurting one of their division rivals. So I understand the equation there. It's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that's the reason they made the trade with Philly. But even still, I imagine if I was Dallas and the option is 13 and a third or 15 and a second, I'm taking 15 and a second. So, I really think that, you don't even need to make the math work with the Chicago one of saying, well, should the Patriots have given us first? They probably wouldn't have had to. They probably would have only had to give up a second. And that's why I have to think that they actually didn't want Justin Fields. Because if they did and they didn't go up and get him, that's disgraceful.
Yep. No, I agree. And, I'll say just on Dallas with, taking offers like that, I think it's risky in the NFL draft when you move down a lot, because there is never a guarantee that you're going to get your guy. Who knows? Maybe Vegas comes up and gets Parsons, ahead of them at 14 or something. So I don't blame him for that part. But no, I agree with you. It's disgraceful that the Patriots, again, it's the arrogance of Belichick. He doesn't think that he needs this guy with all these tools and the upside, who, by the way, would be perfect learning behind Cam Newton. Like, this would be the perfect transition for Justin Fields. This is a system that he can be successful in. But no, Belichick is as Paul Feinbaum is saying today, apparently, he's lazy. He's going to sit back there. He covets his draft capital too much. We have 11 picks. We can move some of these things. We don't need 11 players. We need a quarterback, a good quarterback. And he's going to sit back and take Mac Jones. I know he's buddy with Saban. And, I want to make a point for Mac Jones, and I was pissed last night, and I'm still a little ticked off today. I don't think Mac Jones at 15 is a bad pick. In fact, it's a very good value. But the reason I'm upset about the pick is because we did not move up for Justin Fields when he was on the board at 11. That is just astounding to me that we did not do that. And that's why I'm going to compare Mac Jones to Justin Fields for the rest of their careers. And, I'm rooting for Mac. I think he'd be successful in this system. But my thing is, Justin Fields has the tools to win you a Super Bowl and be a league MVP. And obviously it's a little bit of a risk. And he's got a low floor. But Mac Jones has a high floor, but I don't think he has the guy. I think at best he's healthy Jimmy Garoppolo, which we've seen can't win you a Super Bowl, can barely stay on the field, first of all. I was saying to my friends last night, I would, at this point, with Justin Fields off the board, with Trey Lance off the board, I would have loved Trey Lance too, by the way. I would rather go get Jimmy, if it's possible still, because I've been kind of telling people like Jimmy's not the answer. But if it comes down between Mac Jones and Jimmy Garoppolo, I would rather have the more proven commodity in Jimmy Garoppolo than, Mac Jones, who hasn't played in the NFL yet. Now, I think I think he can be a guy who's good. I think he was a very good college player. He could be a, good NFL starting quarterback, maybe above average at best. But I just think he's limited by his athleticism. I hate the fact that he literally looks like a Lego figure. The kid gained all the weight in his torso. There's nothing in his arms and legs. It's astounding to me. But I just think he doesn't have that, it factor that can take us over the top. I think he's a guy who we're going to be a wild card team. Maybe if the Bills have a down year, we can win the East, but I don't see us making AFC championship games. I don't see us winning Super Bowls with him. And I hope he proves me wrong, but Justin Fields, give up a first-round pick, and that guy can win you Super Bowls. He might bust. Who knows? But I'd rather them take the risk and try to win Super Bowls. That's the point of the NFL. That's why we are fans of teams, because we want them to win Super Bowls. I don't want my team to go to the playoffs every year. I don't want my team to, win 11 games or, 10 games every year and be consistent. I want my team to win Super Bowls. I don't care if we have to suck for a little while. I want championships. Now, I'm a self-Pats fan, but I don't think that's too much to ask for my team to want to win Super Bowls.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll push back on that is a little bit of what Mike Reese said. By the way, and to your point earlier about the draft going long, I meant to mention this, but there was some stuff to back this up, because I think Reese said that the pick, if the draft went as long as it did last year, it should have happened at 9:45, and it happened a full half hour later, which is a lot in terms of like one pick moving that much, and it was just those fans coming on stage and whoever else was delivering the pick. It was
just dumb.
And introducing them every single time, and it's like, come on, we get it at this point. But even still, also from Mike Reese, which I wanted to mention, was that like 3 days or 4 days before the draft, he was talking about who the Patriots would take, and he was asked what does your insight tell you about who the Patriots might like here? And he said, and Mike Reese is plugged in as anybody. Like Mike Reese is like, if you're going to trust anybody, trust Mike Reese with everything that you hear from him. He said that, to me, it all comes back to Mac Jones on the quarterback the Patriots were interested in, because the Patriots.
I was saying for months that this is going to happen probably. And again, I'm not mad that it happened. I'm mad that Fields was there and we could have taken him. I think that's what most New England fans are pissed off about. I think if Fields went at 8, 9, 10, something like that, and it was just off the board, and we're like, all right, whatever. A quarterback needy team took him. We'd all be fine. We'd all be like, all right, let's get on the Mac train. But no, he was there. We had a shot, and I legitimately don't believe that you couldn't outbid Chicago.
Listen, don't get me wrong. In the moment, I wanted Justin Fields too, and I still wish they had moved up for Justin Fields. But Matt, like Mike Reese said, they like the accuracy of Mac Jones. They like that type of quarterback more than anything. And you compared him to Jimmy Garoppolo. And look, I mean, we talk about, Jimmy Garoppolo not being good enough to win you a Super Bowl, but he got you there. I mean, he got the 49ers there. And I understand there was a lot of things that helped him do that. He's had a lot working in his favor. But at the same time, the Patriots have a lot working in their favor right now with the rest of their roster, and they have a better coach than the Niners did. And they don't have a coach like Kyle Shanahan who's blown a couple Super Bowls now in his time, if you include what he did with Atlanta, which I think people could. So, I personally, if we're going to do the Mac Jones versus Jimmy Garoppolo thing, I'd take Mac Jones because, one, he's way cheaper, and two, he's more highly touted out of college than Garoppolo was, and I think he has better tools than Garoppolo does. I think that they're very, very similar in a lot of ways. But I still look at it and I say, okay, I think Bill Belichick can mold this guy as he wanted to with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, coming in as the player that he is and in the situation he is, he does have Tom Brady in front of him, but I don't know how much of a difference that makes and whether or not that was, a world of difference or not. But being groomed by Bill Belichick, I think Mac Jones has just as good, if not better, of a chance to succeed as Jimmy Garoppolo did when he was in that situation. So that's why I'm okay with it. And I think that, on top of that, playing a quarterback and starting a quarterback on a rookie contract and having that, set
I
number
100%
for a
agree
while,
with this part.
that is, and it would have been the same case with Justin Fields. So, I'm just talking about the Jimmy Garoppolo versus Mac Jones thing. If we're just talking about those two, let's pretend we're in a world where they didn't like Justin Fields for whatever reason. They don't like the athletic quarterback. They passed on Lamar Jackson. They don't like that type of quarterback. They want the pocket passer. Okay. If that's the case, I think you take Mac Jones versus Jimmy Garoppolo pretty much every time because of those factors. And we see so many of these teams that have won in recent years have had cost-effective, options at quarterback, and that's the reason they've gone where they have. I mean, even the Chiefs, when they won, they had Patrick Mahomes at cost control. Now that's changed in recent years. But the Mahomes thing and the Wilson when they won, and there's other examples I can't think of off the top of my head right now. But Jared Goff with the Rams when they went to the Super Bowl and almost won. Like, that's a system and a strategy that has consistently worked for winning football games. So I'm hopeful that it can be the same situation with Mac Jones.
I agree, and I'm very hopeful I want everything you just said to be true. I have my doubts, and I wanted my guy. That's all I want. But we'll move on from this. But I did hear one quote from Daniel Jeremiah last week, and this was what hurt my Mac Jones argument, and it blew my mind when he said it. And I think I'll share it here. But he said, "What can Mac Jones do better than Daniel Jones?" Coming out as prospects. And that just blew my mind because I'm like, man, Daniel Jones is more athletic. Daniel Jones has the better arm, just as smart. He worked with some of the best college coaches in America, David Cutcliffe and Duke. He coached both of the Manning brothers. Just kind of that, I was like, man, now that just hurt everything that I want to believe in Mac Jones. And Daniel Jeremiah, I think he's one of the best evaluators out there, and he'll be a GM soon, I bet. And he had Mac as a late first-round pick, and I think that's just accurate. And I think just let's temper expectations, New England fans. I want this guy to be successful. I want him to start day one at this point. I'm off the Cam train. Anyone but Cam has been what I'm saying for a while, but we'll see what he does. I'm rooting for you, Mac. I'd like to see get some abs because, my God, the birthing hips that he's got, man, that was.
Oh my goodness.
He reminded me of like a high school principal going to break up a fight last night when he was walking. So we got to work on that. But you know what? Go, Mac. I believe in you. Not going to buy your jersey yet, but make me want to.
Well, look, this is what I'll say about the thing about Mac Jones and Daniel Jones, okay? Mac Jones, a lot more accurate than Daniel Jones, much more accurate, and a lot less turnover prone. And I know you're going to bring up the weapons, but, the weapons are definitely helpful. Definitely helped Mac Jones have a better year. But it didn't stop him from throwing ducks that would have been picked off, at any time. And he was playing against much better defenses than Daniel Jones was. So, I think I'm not going to discount the fact that Mac Jones was helped by his weapons. I think that element of his game has just been a little bit overrated because I think, the fact that he's as accurate as he is, still has to put it on him. If he underthrows him by 5 yards, that ball is getting picked off, and the fact that it didn't, and I know that, it's easy when your receivers are getting 5 yards of separation half the time. But even still, I think that part has, because he's played with such great players, he is, as a result, his what he has accomplished has been taking a hit a little bit, which was Heisman finalist, 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, 4 picks last year.
No, he had a great year. That's not something you can take away from him.
Yeah, insane numbers. And I think the Daniel Jones comparison, it's fun with the last names, but I don't really see it a lot. I mean, Daniel Jones
more
is
just the prospect themselves, the actual, you take away the stats and everything, but that was just quite the shocker for me because I just never thought about it that way. And then he dropped that, and it's like, this is one of the best evaluators in the game saying this. So just astounding to me.
I mean, it is scary because, I don't like Daniel Jones either. So, believe me, I trust Daniel Jeremiah too. I think he's one of the best as well. I just think that it doesn't work for me. It's not something I understand. Like, I think I hope the last name didn't suck him in too much because that's the fun thing about that. But we'll see if it ends up working out or not. But the fact is, I think this is what the Patriots wanted. I have to believe that because, again, if
I hate that I have to agree with you.
Yeah, I understand that Bill Belichick likes to do things his way, doesn't want to trade up, doesn't want to give up extra value, yada, 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 all those things. Fine. But I think, as you kind of mentioned it, and I think we got we forgot about this because Mac Jones was, penciled in at 3 for so long. We forgot about the fact that, hey, this 3 months ago, there was questions about whether this guy would be a first-round pick at all. And not just, whether it be the 15th pick or not. There was people were talking about, should the Patriots take this guy in the second round, not the first round? And that there was some, that was starting to grow a little bit as Mac Jones continued to rise up the board. But I think overall, the thing that kind of stuns me about this whole Mac Jones situation is, as I'm trying to remember it now, I just lost my train of thought. But I think the idea that Jones comes in as a guy that, they just like a lot of tools about him. They like, he's their mold of quarterback. I think that's what Belichick really wanted about it. Because to me, that move up the board, I think this is what I was getting at, was that, the whole idea of Belichick not wanting to give that value. I understand that. But I think at the end of the day, the fact that he might have reached on Mac Jones, he might have genuinely reached on Mac Jones because that's, like we said, he wasn't that high a month ago. So he took the quarterback, and a lot of people had questions of, would Bill Belichick ever take a quarterback in the first round? Would he take Mac Jones at 15? Because he's never taken a quarterback that high. And quarterbacks are often drafted ahead of where they would be on the big board. That happens all the time. Would Bill Belichick, allow himself to do that? And I think he proved last night that he would. So with that being the case, I think if Bill Belichick, like Justin Fields, he would have traded up to do that, because I think he basically lost value, if you want to say it that way, with the big board anyway by drafting Mac Jones where he did. So I don't think he would have had any problem moving up considering what he actually did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get it. Again, I think the whole thing from my end is I think he's wrong.
Yeah. Well,
I know it's blasphemous, but you know what?
No, you know what, Nason? It's not, because Nason, the way the drafts have gone in recent years with Bill Belichick, I don't think it's unfair of you to say you think he's wrong.
Yeah, we have earned the right to question him on some of his moves as a general manager in the draft. I was reading something he hasn't drafted well in years, and it's fair enough, and you hope that he's making the right decisions. He's earned the reputation to be able to back it up and take some risks. But the fact is, we've had some really bad drafts, and we're making up for it with veterans right now. So we'll see. Again, let's go, Mac.
Yeah,
I really hope he signs the McDonald's endorsement immediately.
Yeah. Real quick, I do want to look at some of the comments we got earlier. I haven't been paying attention to them. Hold on, wait a second. That was a close one. I gotta make sure I plug in my laptop. If the stream crashed at 30 minutes, that would have been bad. That would have been a bad situation. But I caught it at 3%, so I think we're good.
There we go.
Yeah, just some time. But some of the comments, thankfully, I lucked out by looking at that. It's Gear was in there talking to us. It's Gear always tunes in for all the streams. For us to get Fields, we got to give up another first-round pick, probably. Don't think BB likes that. We just talked about that, and everybody. Jackson Moan saying wanted Fields too. So, what we just talked about, basically. Everybody kind of wanted Fields, and we'll just have to see if Belichick's right on that. But I want to talk about a few more things about the draft before we wrap up here. As it relates to some of what you thought of the rest of the picks. I want to know, let's just go through real quick. What was your favorite pick of the night? What did you think was the one that stood out to you the most as something, you thought a team got a steal? Or I know you talked about Dallas getting the best defender in the class. I don't know if that's it, if it was something else, but which pick did you give the highest grade to?
Well, highest grade. Let me think. I got to think on this one. I mean, there were a lot that I really liked. I think one that jumps off the bat immediately is San Francisco taking Trey Lance instead of Mac Jones. I think that was the best decision. And my God, good for Kyle Shanahan, because there's been rumors that San Fran leaks their picks every year. We knew Nick Bosa was going to be the pick. Everyone knew Deebo Samuel was a favorite, but man, they fooled everybody. So that one, I think that's just high upside. And I think Kyle Shanahan has learned the lesson of, I can't win with Kirk Cousins type of quarterbacks. I need to add that mobile aspect to it. So that one was one I loved. I love the Darisaw pick of Minnesota, trading down from 14 to 23 and still getting a guy who I valued as I thought it was going to be a top 15 pick, at least top 20. Just because of the need for offensive tackles. This dude's a big dude who can play left or right tackle. That's a great move for them, and to pick up that kind of value. So that was one of my favorites. I also love Rashad Bateman going to Baltimore. I think he's the type of receiver that Lamar Jackson needs to be successful. A guy who's really high on our boards. I think I had him going to the Patriots at one point during one of my mocks really early on, and then his value kind of dropped. But that dude can play. So those were, definitely some of my favorites. I think the Lance has to be the best one for me just because you moved up, you made everybody think you were going to mess it up, and they get a guy who is perfect for Shanahan's system. And, I don't know what's going to happen with Jimmy Garoppolo and him competing. I think Jimmy will start, but if they come out week one and say that Trey Lance is the starter, I'm picking him as Offensive Rookie of the Year.
All right, I like it. I agree with you. I think the Trey Lance pick was really, really interesting. I think Lance or Fields, I would have liked for them because I'm excited to see what, I really want to see what Kyle Shanahan, who I think is a great offensive coordinator, as much as I just basked him, I think he's a great offensive coach, and I was excited to see what he could do with a different type of quarterback. And I'm just really interested to see what it'll be with Trey Lance. And Trey Lance, look, as much as you want to say he played at a smaller school and he did all that, 20 touchdowns and 0 picks is crazy. So I don't care where he
Carson Wentz played there too, and you know what? I know he had a bad year last year, but he was an MVP candidate for multiple years. So let's just don't discount the small schools. I've learned that I've learned that, and I'm just not going to do it anymore. If the dude can play, the dude can play. And I'll throw in another one too that I just love because I noticed it on my notes, and I just got to say it. Sewell to Detroit. Him dropping a 7 is astounding. This dude could be a Hall of Famer. Going to be probably the best left tackle in all of football in a matter of years, and he'll be there for 10. So Dan Campbell, this was the easiest pick in the draft, I think. You can't hesitate to take a guy like that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you're right. Surtain was a guy that, Sewell was a guy that you always knew no matter who was going to take him. It's not the flashiest pick, obviously, because it's
they're getting the winner, though.
But it's going to be a guy that you can trust on your team for 12 years. And, with Detroit, we got to be careful with that because, we know they've had some players that could, they think they're going to be on the team for a long time and they, might retire early, especially when they're great. So we hope that doesn't happen with Penei Sewell. But, in theory, he should be a guy that's on the table for them for at least a decade and can, keep whatever quarterback they're going to have in the future upright. And, who really cares if it's Jared Goff this season or not? It's about the next guy that steps in there. But, a good pick to solidify it now and get a guy that's going to help you down the road a little bit. But, would you rather take the quarterback there? I don't know. I think they have to.
I just look at it. It's too early in the process, in their rebuild process, to take a quarterback. No rookie's going to go in there and be successful. You have Jared Goff. You're paying him anyway, so you might as well ride him out for a little bit. Fill out the roster. Get some playmakers. They have no wide receivers, and now I know they have round 2, 3, 4. They can get some guys, but you got to fill out the roster. You cannot put a rookie back there. He will have nothing. Yeah. We saw what Joe Burrow had with last year in Cincinnati, and he was nearly killed. Now I think that offensive line improved a little bit through free agency, and I think they can pick up a guy in day 2. But you have to have some sort of structure for a rookie. So getting a franchise left tackle is a very good start.
Yeah. All right. What was your least favorite pick of the night?
Man.
You can't say Mac Jones, by the way.
It's not. Again, I think, with the fact that Fields fell, that's the only reason I'm unhappy about the Mac Jones pick. But this is something I predicted for a long time. In terms of my least favorites, the Raiders do this every year. They take a guy who is a second or third round player, and they take him in the mid first. Alex Leatherwood. If he made it to the late first, maybe I get it, but they just want guys from big schools who are big, and it's such a reach for him. The Eric Stokes pick with Green Bay, you literally just had a report that Aaron Rodgers wants out of Green Bay, and you apparently want to keep him. Why in the world are you taking a cornerback who's a second-round player at the end of the first? Like, that's just, if I'm the GM of Green Bay, I have to imagine the thought process going in is, oh, Aaron wants to leave. You know what? I'm just going to insult him even more. I'm going to, just slap him across the face with this pick. Let's reach on a cornerback who's just really fast. No offense to Stokes. I mean, I'm sure he'll be a fine player, and I think I had him as a round 2 guy, but not a first rounder. So that was just not a good move, especially with a guy like Elijah Moore on the board still, just a wide receiver they could have really used. Mm-hmm. And then, I think this one has to be my least favorite pick so far. And it's Travis Etienne going to Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I don't like Etienne as a player. I think he was going to go high second round. I like him. I love the fact that they're pairing him with Trevor Lawrence, actually. That's the only reason this isn't an F for me. But you don't take running backs in the first round, especially not the second, maybe third best one. Najee Harris going to Pittsburgh. I get it at least. I don't love it, but I get it. But you have James Robinson, who UDFA – I hope I put those letters in the right order.
Yeah. I mean, and by the way, James Robinson, to your point, a perfect example of why you don't take running backs.
Exactly. 1,000-yard rusher, nearly rookie of the year. Like, come on. You're paying him nothing. You brought in Carlos Hyde as the backup. He's fine. He was a 1,000-yard rusher a couple years ago, and he knows Urban Meyer. And I totally get if Jacksonville wanted to take a running back here, but you have so many needs you need to fill out in that offense. You need a tackle. You need another wide receiver. You need a tight end. I predicted Pat Freiermuth here. I actually could see them taking him at 45 or 33 tonight. You need defense. You need a safety. Trayvon Moehrig would have been great here. Moehrig, I think I'm getting that one right. They need an edge rusher. You could have taken a pass rusher here. Why did you take a running back? I mean, I get it. Etienne's good, but I know, and Urban Meyer coming out and saying he's going to be the third down back, I don't think that means anything. I think he's going to be the starter. I think he just wants to make Robinson and Hyde feel a little better about themselves. But there's no value here. This is a bad pick. I get pairing them up. I get it's going to make Trevor Lawrence comfortable, and I get Etienne as a good player. But you have a bunch of other things that you need to cover. You could have taken him at probably 30, even if they took him first pick tonight. That would have been fine. But you're just passing up, guys, and I can't support taking a running back in the first round. So that's my least favorite, along with those other two. I mean, they're bad picks. It's not good value. It's huge reaches.
I mean, let's talk about a couple of those real quick. So let's talk about Stokes for a second, because I wonder. I understand what you're saying. But, you're talking about how fast he is and the fact that they took him in the first place. I wonder how much of taking him was as a result of the fact of Kevin King being burnt every single play, it feels like, in that championship game, being literally burnt into their memory. It's like, you just want a guy that's not going to get run past. Yeah, because
I get it. I mean, I just think there's better guys on the board at this rate. Tyson Campbell.
As much as we talk about the fact that they still need weapons for Aaron Rodgers, I think it's fair to say the reason they lost that game was pretty much, the number one reason was probably Kevin King. You could really pick something with that at least.
Again, I think it comes down to just, you got to look at your board, and, maybe Green Bay really just loves Stokes. I get it. The speed is there, but it just seems like there's a lot better players left on the board. Whether you want to go cornerback, Elijah Moore is a hell of a player, and I don't get why you pass up a guy like that. Maybe I get it. If you want to find a wide receiver late in the draft, that's fine. Take a better player. That's what it comes down to. Just take a better guy, whether it's Asante Samuel Jr. or Tyson Campbell, or Kelvin Joseph or something like that. I don't think Stokes deserves to be at this pick. And also, again, Aaron Rodgers is leaving, but you definitely want to keep him. Just show him at least a sign. I saw it was like a Joel Klatt tweet, and he was saying Packers have done everything wrong. They've, flirted with every girl at the party. They gave their number to one when they drafted Jordan Love last year. Like, just spend a night at home, get a wide receiver, cuddle up, watch a movie. I don't fucking know. Just be nice to him.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's funny. And then on the ETN pick, I mean, I agree with you pretty much wholeheartedly. I would not have done that at all, but I'll play devil advocate a little bit, and I'll say I think that there's a chance that the idea there is to play both of those guys the same way that Cleveland does with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, with James Robinson being your Nick Chubb and ETN being your Kareem Hunt, and that worked really, really well for Cleveland last year. And I think part of it could also be what you're kind of talking about Jacksonville. Having Trevor Lawrence, they don't want to get him killed in year one, so they might want to be a little bit run heavy year one while they're still building up their team and building up a safe environment for Trevor Lawrence to succeed instead of dropping him back 50 times a game and letting him get killed. So I think I understand it from those two standpoints, and I think that in theory, ETN and Robinson could be a really good tandem, just like we saw in Cleveland, and that led into the playoffs last year.
No, I agree. Again, for me, it's value. Like, you can get these guys later. You clearly, James Robinson is the perfect example that you can find players who can, do whatever you need to do later in the draft. And I think you have to invest in more, what's the word I'm looking for? Important offensive positions. Running back is, it's not as important a position when it comes to drafting anymore. I think we all understand that. Unless it's a top 10 prospect, I don't think you need to take one in round one. Najee Harris, I get why he went in round one. I wouldn't have taken him there.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh has a lot of needs. They needed an offensive tackle. And guess what? A lot of them fell. Tevin Jenkins, it was a perfect example. Like, why is this guy still available? There's a lot of good offensive linemen still on the board. So, we just look at positional value. Now, I'll go back and say I've been a guy who was, pounding the table for Jamar Chase to go to Cincinnati over Penei Sewell. And my reasoning was, the elite wide receiver is more valuable than the offensive tackle, that you can find a good one in round two. But that's comparing, wide receivers and offensive tackles. Running backs, I'm sorry, they're way down the pecking order.
Yeah. And speaking of, I want to get to the second round too and what you expect there. Cincinnati, you just kind of mentioned it. They're in a pretty good situation come second round because there are a lot of good tackles left on the board, offensive linemen they could potentially take and pair with Jamar Chase. And then suddenly you might be talking about them as one of the big winners of the draft.
I think so. Sorry, I zoned out for a second. I think Cincinnati's setting themselves up really well. And I think for the last week, I've been pounding the table saying, like, you get a value like Sam Cosmi in the second round and Jamar Chase. That's the best draft I could picture for them. And it's still a very realistic possibility. They might get somebody better. Tevin Jenkins could be there for them. And he's a plug-in right tackle who could potentially play left. A lot of these guys, you might be able to swing to guard. Who knows? But man, they killed it last night, I think.
Yeah. Anything else you're looking for in the second round tonight, or the third round if you want to go there as well?
There's a lot of good players left on the board, a lot of good wide receivers. Elijah Moore, how he's still there is beyond me. As a Pats fan, I really want a guy to drop to 46. Terrace Marshall Jr., Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, Tylan Wallace. There's just so many. And, at this point, Mac is the quarterback, so let's get him some weapons. Let's surround him with everything. I know we have Aguilar. We've got Kendrick Bourne. Obviously, Edelman's gone. We need to add another piece to this offense, but just continue to give him weapons. And let's just, I'm going to take the best player available approach tonight. Just get the top guy on the board. I don't care what position at this point, but get me a weapon at one point.
All right, awesome. Well, Nason, thank you for joining us. Thank you for talking draft, and we appreciate it as always. And if anything you're planning post-draft, I know you always do the super early. I'm expecting your super early 2022 mock to drop in the next month as well. Anything else?
I'll try to get that out. I'll probably do a grades thing, and then I'm going to have to take just a hiatus for a little bit.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, guys, make sure to check out all Nason's stuff. It's great as always, all the stuff on the draft. And thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to subscribe to the Wicked Smart Sports Guys on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Guy Boston Sports. Follow on Twitter at Guy Boston Sports too. Check out Nason on Twitter at NatSkyBoston. Check out me on Twitter at KJ Doyle. And thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.